I am 106 years old. I have buried a husband, watched 3 of my children grow gray, and held great-great-grandchildren in these hands that used to shake with fear every time I opened a bank statement. I have lived long enough to see the world change 5 times over. And I am telling you right now, before I say another word, that what I am about to share with you is the one thing I wish with every bone left in this old body that somebody had sat me down and told me when I was your age. Because I made a mistake at 63 years old that I still cry about every single month. Not because the money is gone, not entirely, but because of what that money meant, what it could have been, and how one quiet afternoon, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, I made a decision that I thought was smart, that everyone around me told me was smart, and it turned out to be the most expensive mistake of my entire life. So please, pull up a chair. Let me talk to you like the grandmother I am, because if even one of you listening to me today changes your course because of what I'm about to say, then these 106 years will have meant something. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. Hit that little button right there, because what we talk about here, these real stories, these hard truths, these things the financial world doesn't put in the glossy brochures. This is the conversation that changes lives, and I don't want you to miss a single one. I need to take you back to 1981. I was 63 years old, and I felt for the first time in my adult life like I could finally breathe. My husband, Gerald, had worked 31 years for the same paper company in Ohio, 31 years of the same lunch pail, the same route to work, the same handshake from the same foreman every Monday morning. And when they handed him his retirement package, it felt like winning something, like the universe was finally settling a debt. Between Gerald's pension, a fixed monthly amount that the company promised would never change, and my own modest savings from the years I'd spent bookkeeping for a local dentist, we had what I thought was a very respectable nest egg. About $240,000 sitting in a savings account at our local bank. Now, I know to the young people watching this, that doesn't sound like much, but in 1981, that was real money. That was we made it money. That was we can stop worrying money. And that is exactly the problem. Because the moment you decide to stop worrying, the moment you look at a number in an account and think this is enough, this will hold, that is the moment the ground begins to shift underneath you, so slowly you don't even feel it moving. Our bank manager, a very kind man named Philip, who wore the same brown cardigan every winter, sat us down and told us what he thought we should do with that money. He was not a bad man. He was not trying to cheat us. He genuinely believed what he was saying. And what he said was this: put it somewhere safe, put it in certificates of deposit, lock it in. You're retired now. You don't need growth. You need stability, safe, stable. Those 2 words cost me more than I can calculate. I remember nodding. Gerald reached over and patted my hand. We both nodded like good students who had finally learned the right answer. And on a Tuesday in September, we signed the paperwork, locked our $240,000 into a series of 5-year CDs, and walked out of that bank feeling like adults who had finally gotten something right. I want you to really sit with that feeling, that satisfaction, that relief, because I need you to understand that I wasn't reckless. I wasn't foolish. I was doing exactly what a sensible, careful, responsible woman in 1981 was told to do. I was following the rules. I was listening to the people who were supposed to know. And that is why this story is so important, because the most dangerous financial mistakes aren't made by careless people. They're made by careful people who are following the wrong map. Over the next few years, everything seemed fine. The CDs matured, the interest was decent, we renewed them. Gerald and I lived simply, the way we always had. We didn't take extravagant vacations. We didn't buy new cars every 3 years. We had a garden and a television and Sunday dinners with our children, and that felt like enough. And for a while it was, but then the 1990s came, and then the 2000s. And each decade that passed, each time I went to the grocery store and paid a little more for the same can of soup, I started to notice something. The number in our account wasn't really growing. Not really. Not the way prices were growing. We were renewing those CDs, yes. The money was technically still there, but it was buying less. Every single year, it was buying a little bit less. Gerald passed in 1999, and suddenly I was alone with that money, and it felt much smaller than it had when there were two of us to manage it. Now, here is where I need you to really listen, because this is the part they never tell you in the retirement brochures. This is the part that Philip in his brown cardigan never mentioned. Not because he was dishonest, but because nobody was talking about it the way they should have been. Inflation doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come to your door with a warning. It just slowly, quietly, relentlessly eats. It eats your purchasing power the way rust eats a garden fence. You don't see it happening day to day, but one morning you look up and the fence is gone. When Gerald and I put that $240,000 into those CDs in 1981, we felt rich. By the time I was in my mid-70s, that same amount of money, even with the interest we'd earned over the years, had the purchasing power of something dramatically less, because everything around it had changed and the money itself had barely moved. But here's what really keeps me up at night. Here's the part that makes me cry. If we had taken even half of that money, just half, and invested it in a simple, boring, nobody gets excited about it stock index fund in 1981, we would have been sitting on something extraordinary by the late 1990s. The market went through a spectacular bull run through the 1980s and 1990s, not because people were gambling, not because they were being reckless, but because they put their money where the economy was growing, and they let it grow alongside it. I didn't do that. I chose safety. And safety, when held too tightly for too long, becomes its own kind of poverty. My daughter, she's 82 now, still sharp as a tack, takes after my side of the family. She sat with me about 15 years ago and helped me figure out the numbers, what our $240,000 could have been. She had a little laptop computer and she typed in the numbers, and we both just sat there in silence for a long time. I won't tell you the exact figure because it makes my chest tight even now, but I will tell you that it was enough that I would never have had to make a single difficult choice in my final decades. It was enough that I could have helped my grandchildren with college without blinking. It was enough that the word enough would have meant something completely different for the rest of my life. Instead, I spent my 70s and early 80s doing careful, anxious math every single month, watching the account, rationing, not in a desperate way. I was never homeless, never hungry, and I thank God for that. But rationing in that quiet, dignified, heartbreaking way that a lot of retired women know, where you don't order the thing you actually want at the restaurant, where you skip the heating bill a little bit, where you say no to yourself so many times that no becomes the language you speak. And the cruelest thing? It all could have been so different. Not with luck. Not with some genius investment tip or some insider secret, just with a different decision on that Tuesday in September 1981. Just with someone who cared enough to say, "You are not as fragile as you think you are. Your money doesn't have to be this afraid." That is what I cry about. Not just the money, the courage I didn't have, the information I didn't have, the conversation that nobody had with me. I want to be that conversation for you. So let me tell you what I know now, what 106 years of living has taught me about money and time and the choices we make at 63, thinking we are at the end of something when really, oh my darling, we are still so far from the end. The first thing I want you to understand is this: 63 is not old. I know it feels old. I know your body might be whispering to you that the road is shorter now than it's long. But look at me. I am 106. Do the math. I had 43 more years after that Tuesday in September. 43 years. That is longer than most careers. That is longer than most marriages. That is a lifetime inside a lifetime. And every financial decision I made at 63 had to stretch across all 43 of those years. When I put my money somewhere safe, I was making a 43-year decision without realizing it. Nobody told me that. Nobody said, "Eleanor, your money needs to last longer than you think your life will last." And that is the single most important thing I can say to you today. When you are making retirement decisions, you are not planning for 5 years or 10 years. You may be planning for 4 decades. And 4 decades of inflation, of market growth, of compounding interest, that changes everything about what safe actually means. The second thing I want you to understand is that there is a difference between risk and growth. In 1981, I thought those were the same thing. I thought investing in the stock market meant gambling. It meant rolling dice with my future, because that's the language people used. Don't gamble your retirement. Don't risk what you've worked for. And because I loved Gerald and we had worked so hard, I didn't want to gamble. I wanted to protect. But protection has a cost. And the cost of protecting money too aggressively is that you protect it right out of its own future. A diversified, balanced investment, not all stocks, not all risk, but a thoughtful, age-appropriate mix that includes growth, is not gambling. It is the opposite of gambling. It is trusting in the long, slow, grinding upward movement of human commerce and innovation and work. It is saying, I believe that the world will be making things and selling things and building things 20 years from now. And I want a small, quiet piece of that. That belief would have served me so much better than the belief that a CD was safe harbor. The third thing And I say this as a woman who loved her bank manager and trusted him completely. Please find a fiduciary financial advisor, not just any advisor, a fiduciary, someone who is legally, ethically, contractually required to put your interests first, not someone who earns a commission on the products they sell you, not someone who benefits when you buy a certain annuity or a certain fund, someone whose entire job is to look at your specific life, your specific timeline, your specific needs, and tell you the truth. I did not have that in 1981. I had a kind man in a brown cardigan who meant well and told me what he'd been trained to tell cautious retirees. I needed someone who would challenge my assumptions, someone who would say, wait, before we lock this money away, let me show you what 40 years of inflation does to a CD. Let me show you what 40 years of even modest stock market returns does to the same amount. Let me show you both maps and let you decide with your eyes open. That is the conversation I needed. That is the conversation you deserve. And the fourth thing, this is the one I feel most deeply in whatever is left of this old heart. Don't let fear make your financial decisions. I was afraid. I was afraid of losing what we'd worked for. I was afraid of watching numbers go down. I was afraid of the market, which I didn't understand, which felt like a foreign country with unfamiliar rules. And so I let fear point me toward the familiar, the local bank, the guaranteed rate, the paper certificate I could hold in my hand. Fear is not wisdom. Fear dressed up in the language of caution is still just fear. And I let it make a 43-year decision for me on a Tuesday afternoon when I was 63 years old and thought I was being responsible. Please don't make my mistake. Please look at the full picture. Please give your money permission to grow. Please understand that you are not at the end. You have so much time left, and your future self, the one who will be 75 and 85, and who knows, maybe 95, sitting in a chair trying to remember whether she has enough to cover the heating bill this month. Your future self is counting on the decision you make today. I think about her all the time, the woman I could have been, the choices she would have had, the peace she would have felt, not the peace of safety, but the peace of abundance, the quiet confidence of someone who understood that money, like life, has to be allowed to move and grow and breathe. I chose a kind of stillness that cost me everything it could have become. You don't have to. If this story meant something to you, if it made you think, or made you want to make a phone call, or made you look at your own retirement plan with new eyes, please share this video with someone you love, a friend who's approaching 60, a sibling who just retired, a parent who is nodding along right now because they recognize themselves in this story. These conversations are how we protect each other. These conversations are how we do better than the generation before us. And please, if you haven't subscribed, do it now. We have so many more stories like this one. Real stories, hard stories, the kind that don't show up in the brochures, but that change everything when you finally hear them. I'll be right here. At 106, I have plenty more to say. And honey, I'm not done yet.